Senator, first, I want to talk about some news within the United States Senate. Are you in the opinion that we should have one major omnibus bill or two separate spending bills?
Oh, listen, I'll go with whatever works. I personally think it'd be easier to get the border funding passed, because I think the tax bill settling on, I think the major sticking point is going to be what spending level are we going to agree to within the conference. We've got big spenders in our conference as well. I don't think anybody voted for President Trump to maintain Biden's spending levels, and I want to talk a little bit about that. But I think the easiest thing to do would be two packages, quite honestly, so we can get that border funding right away before the news media starts talking about what it looks like to deport somebody. Could have a few individuals waver on their support for that. So I'd rather get the border funding done and then take our time. Part of the tax thing, I'd really like to simplify and rationalize our tax code. Primary goal is prevent a massive automatic tax increase from occurring in 2026. I mean, that ought to be incentive enough. But as long as we're doing that, if we can simplify and rationalize tax code, that'd be a good thing. But we must agree on dramatically lower spending levels than what we're spending right now. This is absurd that we haven't returned to some pre-pandemic baseline. We've in 2019, Charlie, we spent $4.4 trillion. Then we had the spending spree, during 2020, that was $6.6 trillion. Last 5 years, we've averaged $6.5 trillion. We've never returned to pre-pandemic level baseline, which is absurd. It's ridiculous. It's just not justified.
Yeah, so what is the appetite right now in the U.S. Senate to cut spending? Is there anybody in the Democrat Party that's interested in this? Because we're borrowing $1 trillion every 100 days.
No, and my concern is we're not going to have enough Republicans that are willing to do it either. Again, it's so easy to just say, oh, well, that's what we spent last year. And boy, if we don't spend at least that amount, we're going to be accused of starving women and children. So I'm trying to make the case. I'm trying to actually tell the American public these are the numbers, because I think we have a general sense that federal government is totally out of control, but nobody knows specifically. That's what I'm saying. $4.4 trillion in 2019. Last 5 years now, $6.5 trillion. Charlie, that's absurd. It's like a family who makes $100,000, right, or spends $100,000. They have an illness. All of a sudden, they have $50,000 worth of medical bills, so they spend $150,000. That individual gets cured, but they keep going. They continue to spend $150,000 and borrow the money to do it. I mean, nobody would do that. That's exactly what the federal government's doing. So I think we explain this. I've come up with a couple different options. For example, if you go back to 1998, that's the last year the first year we had a surplus since 1969. This was Bill Clinton's spending. And you take Social Security and Medicare off the table. You just plug those in at Biden's 2025 numbers and interest, but inflate all of Bill Clinton's spending to account for population growth and inflation. We'd be spending $5.5 trillion, and we have a balanced budget. So does anybody argue that Bill Clinton didn't spend enough money on all this other crap? If you go back to Obama's 2014, did the same thing, that'd be $6.2 trillion. Even if you use 2019 and inflate it, again, based on population and inflation, you'd be at about 6.5, which is $800 billion less than what Biden says he's going to spend right now. So why would we lock into Biden numbers and be arguing over saving $100 billion or so? I mean, it's so inadequate. We need to dramatically lower the baseline spending level back to what it was prior to the pandemic.
I totally and completely agree. If you were to say just some of the, and I know you've detailed some of this, but where can we find some agreement in the Republican conference of where to cut? Is there any appetite to cut some of the Pentagon budget?
Certainly is on my part. I think we need to really take a look at where do we spend our money. I mean, we've got these massive platforms that can be taken out with asymmetric warfare. We got these Abrams tanks. They have to kind of run out of their hole in Ukraine, fire a couple shots, and run right back because they're vulnerable to the drones. To drones that cost thousands of dollars, not millions. So again, the Pentagon, they're not keeping up with warfare right now. They're coddling to the military-industrial complex. The 155 millimeter shells. This is a prime example. Russia produces those things, about 4.5 million of them, at about $600 a pop. The West can only produce about 2 million shells. We get charged $6,000, 8,000 euros in Europe. That's how we're getting hosed, I'll use that word, by the military industrial complex. So, yeah, no, we've got to take a real serious look at that.